The 1930s may have been marked by hardship, but when it came to entertainment, people found pure magic. Radios glowed warmly in living rooms, theaters dazzled with velvet curtains and golden ceilings, and laughter spilled from comedy shorts between serious films. Families, friends, and neighbors gathered anywhere they could to escape into stories, music, and dreams. Here are some of the forgotten treasures of entertainment from that remarkable era. Ah, kids, you know evenings used to be quieter in my day. We'd all gather around this big wooden radio, shaped like a cathedral, they called it. No one dared chatter once it came alive, glowing softly, humming with voices from another world. It felt almost holy, like the radio was more than furniture. It was our window to the wide, wide world. Sometimes, if you wrote a nice letter to a radio sponsor, they'd send you a bar of soap in the mail. We thought it was magic, getting something so useful and free. I still remember unwrapping that little box, the smell of fresh soap filling the house, and Mama smiling because even in hard times, those small gifts meant a lot. At the movie theater, before the picture started, they'd spray perfume into the air. Imagine that, stepping into a world of velvet seats and chandeliers, and suddenly breathing in a sweet scent like lilacs. It made the whole evening feel dreamy, as if you'd entered another life for a few hours. And oh, bank night raffles. Everyone showed up hoping their name might be drawn. Even a couple of dollars could make a difference back then. We'd sit through the whole show with bated breath, clutching our tickets, dreaming of the moment they'd call out our number. Radio comedians were our stars, and the catchphrases they invented became part of everyday life. You'd walk down the street and hear someone toss a line from Amos and Andy or Jack Benny, and everyone would laugh. It made the world feel smaller, like we were all in on the same joke. Children had their own tricks, of course. I remember sneaking into matinee shows with a ticket stub I'd carefully copied by hand. The thrill of slipping past the usher, my heart pounding, just to sit in the dark with the other kids, it felt like winning a treasure. Some nights, the radio encouraged us to sing along. Can you picture your grandma, a shy girl, belting out songs with her family right there in the living room? We sang as if the announcer could hear us, filling our little house with music and laughter that still echoes in my memory. Saturday matinees were a child's paradise. One week, I won a Mickey Mouse watch. Can you imagine? I wore it proudly, as if Walt Disney himself had handed it to me. That tiny ticking mouse on my wrist made me feel like the luckiest child in the world. Then came those cliffhanger serials at the movies. Every week, the hero dangled from a cliff or the train bore down on him. We'd gasp, clutch our seats, and wait all week long to see what happened next. It kept our imaginations alive, buzzing with wonder. There were clubs, too, little radio fan clubs where we'd share typed program schedules like they were secret maps. We'd trade them around, discussing which shows to catch, as if we were part of some grand society of listeners. Those sheets of paper felt like treasure, and tickets. We saved them. Colorful movie stubs tucked into drawers or pressed into books. Each one carried the memory of a night filled with wonder, laughter, or tears. Sometimes I'd find one months later and remember exactly how I felt watching that picture. Some folks didn't even have electricity, but they'd run their radios off old car batteries. You'd see them carrying that heavy battery home, proud just to have the chance to listen. It shows you how much the radio meant. It wasn't just noise, it was connection. In summer, neighbors would hang a sheet on a wall, set up a projector, and suddenly our dusty street turned into a movie palace. We kids sat on the grass, fireflies flickering, the whole neighborhood gathered together. Those backyard screenings were pure magic. Movie stars were like gods to us. We traded their portraits that came in cigarette packs, swapping Clark Gable for Carole Lombard like baseball cards. I'd keep mine tucked under my pillow, dreaming of Hollywood lights far beyond my small town. Inside the theater, before the reels rolled, the organist would play. Grand, swelling music filled the hall, making your heart race before you'd even seen a single frame. That sound still lingers in my bones, like an overture to a dream. Some families, mine included, built homemade crystal radios. I'll never forget the night we caught a signal from hundreds of miles away, voices crackling out of nowhere. It was like magic, as though the world itself had suddenly grown smaller and closer. Talent contests on the radio were a marvel. Ordinary folks would step up and sing their hearts out, and sometimes they became stars overnight. We listened wide-eyed, thinking maybe, just maybe, someone from our own town could be heard by the whole country. Dish night at the theater was another treat. With your ticket, you'd get a piece of dinnerware. Over time, families collected entire sets, all from the movies. I remember Mama stacking her mismatched bowls with pride, proof of evenings spent together. And, oh, the theaters in summer. They were among the only places with air conditioning, so people would spend entire afternoons there just to cool off. Some even dozed through the double features, lulled by the hum of the machines and the cool, dark air. But for the women, the radio soap operas held a special place. Mama would stir her pot or fold laundry, her ear tilted toward the radio, lost in someone else's troubles. I can still hear the voices, dramatic and full of longing, filling our little kitchen with stories. Before the big feature came on, we'd be treated to cartoon shorts, Betty Boop with her wide eyes and cheeky little songs. The theater would echo with giggles, even from grown-ups. For us kids, she was pure delight, the perfect sparkle before the serious stories rolled on. And then there was the shadow. You've never heard silence until you've sat in a room of children, all whispering his line in their best spooky voices. Who knows what evil lurks? It sent shivers down our spines, but oh, we loved that thrill of pretending to be just as mysterious. When the newsreels played and the announcer declared a sports victory, the audience would erupt in applause right there in the theater. It wasn't just watching. It felt like being part of the moment, a whole town cheering together for a team miles away. Dance marathons were another craze. Couples would cling to each other, half asleep on their feet, swaying to the music as the days dragged on. We kids would peek in, wide-eyed, at the sight of young folks pushing themselves to the limit, determined to win a few dollars and a bit of fame. Even in the countryside, families would gather around radios tuned to live broadcasts of grand opera. Can you picture that? A rough wooden kitchen, lantern flickering, and soaring voices filling the air as if the Metropolitan Opera itself had moved right in with us. Movie theaters back then had ushers dressed sharp as soldiers, caps, brass buttons, and polished shoes. They'd guide you to your seat with a flashlight, making the whole experience feel dignified, as if entering a palace rather than a simple theater. And, oh, those movie palaces. We started with little Nickelodeons, just benches and a flickering screen. But soon we had grand halls with chandeliers glittering above. Walking into one felt like stepping into a fairy tale, a far cry from the dusty streets outside. Radio giveaways were clever things. You'd send in bottle caps or proof of purchase, and one day a prize would arrive in the mail. I once got a shiny pin that way, small and simple, but I wore it proudly, as though the radio announcer himself had given it to me. At night, when the house was dark, the radio dial glowed like a tiny lantern. It kept us company, that soft light and gentle hum, as though it was watching over us. Sometimes I'd fall asleep just staring at it, dreaming of voices from far away. Some folks took to amateur radio, stringing up antennas and sending messages across states. Imagine the wonder of tapping out a signal and hearing a reply from hundreds of miles away. It was like having pen pals carried on invisible waves. Horror films were a real spectacle. When Frankenstein came to town, people actually fainted in their seats. The screams, the gasps, it was all part of the show. Walking out afterward, the night air felt colder, and every shadow seemed alive. Radio variety shows filled our heads with music. We'd hum new songs as we went about our chores, carrying fresh melodies into the streets. That's how tunes spread then, not records or tapes, just the magic of hearing it live and letting it live on in us. At theaters, screen test contests promised ordinary people a shot at Hollywood. Young women would line up, their hearts racing, dreaming their faces might appear on the silver screen. Most never made it, but the hope was enough to keep them glowing. Not every family could afford a radio, so we'd gather at the neighbors'. Picture a room packed wall to wall, everyone leaning forward, hushed as the announcer spoke. It wasn't just about the program, it was about belonging, all of us united in that moment. Comic strip heroes didn't just stay on paper, they leapt into radio. Little Orphan Annie was one of the biggest, her adventures sparking our imaginations. We'd wait eagerly, decoder rings in hand, feeling like we were part of her secret world. I had a scrapbook once, thick with cutouts of movie stars from magazines. I pasted them in carefully, making little collages. That scrapbook was my treasure chest, a way of keeping Hollywood close, even when it felt a million miles away. Amateur hour on the radio was a thrill. Anyone could step up, sing or play, and suddenly they were broadcast to the whole country. We rooted for them, those ordinary folks, and sometimes they made it big. It gave us all hope that dreams could be heard. Magazines often came with movie star paper dolls. We kids traded them like baseball cards, dressing up our favorite stars in glamorous cutout gowns. It was innocent fun, but in our minds, it was like having a little piece of Hollywood right in our hands. Radio dramas were their own kind of magic. The sound men would bang doors, shake tin sheets, or rattle coconut shells for hoofbeats. Sitting there, we could see it all in our minds. The storm, the footsteps, the galloping horse, every sound a doorway to imagination. And on weekends, couples would head to jitterbug contests. For just a nickel, you could dance until your feet gave out, spinning and swinging to the beat. The floor shook with laughter and joy, and for those few hours, the worries of the world didn't seem so heavy. I'll never forget the first time we saw a movie in Technicolor. The whole audience gasped when bright red and green burst across the screen. It was like the world had leapt right into our laps. For days afterward, it felt as though everything outside looked dull compared to that magic. On the radio, quiz shows were popular, but instead of handing out money, they'd give canned goods or household items. People were delighted. It was practical and exciting all at once. Winning a can of peaches could feel like a small fortune during those lean times. When boxing matches were shown on newsreels, the theater erupted like a stadium. Strangers shouted and clapped, fists pumping in the air, as if we were right there ringside. For a moment, we all forgot we were just watching flickering black and white film. Some theaters held themed nights. I remember Western Night, where kids showed up dressed as cowboys, and contests were held before the main show. It felt like stepping into the Wild West, our dusty small town transformed by boots, hats, and laughter. Radio raffles were just as inventive. We'd tape pennies to postcards and mail them in, dreaming of a prize. Dropping that little card into the mailbox, knowing it might carry hope across miles, it gave us something to look forward to in the morning broadcasts. Young girls, and even some daring boys, would copy movie hairstyles. Jean Harlow's Platinum Blonde was the rage. You'd see youngsters with makeshift curls or bleached locks, hoping to capture just a bit of her dazzling Hollywood glow. Radio fan magazines filled with announcers' photos were treasures. We'd pore over them, putting faces to the voices that felt like family. It was strange and wonderful, these ordinary-looking men and women who had become our companions each night. In some theaters, ushers handed out lyric sheets before short sing-along films. Can you imagine a whole theater humming together, words printed on a sheet of paper? Everyone's voices rising, strangers becoming a kind of choir before the movie even began. Couples on dates often stayed through the same film twice. The dim lights, the quiet, the shared popcorn. Why rush home? Watching the picture again wasn't about the movie anymore. It was about savoring those hours together. Radio repair shops were everywhere, as common as barber shops. Men in aprons hunched over glowing tubes, tinkering to bring voices back to life. Losing a radio signal felt like losing a friend, so those shops were vital to our daily joy. Sometimes newspapers announced radio listening parties. Neighbors gathered in one house, folding chairs crammed close, snacks on the table. The radio took center stage, and for an evening we were united, laughing, gasping, and listening as one. Movie theaters even offered babysitting during long double features. Parents could watch in peace while kids were kept busy in playrooms. For many families, it was the only night out they could manage, and it felt like such a gift. Those jungle adventure serials were our favorites. Week by week, we'd follow treasure hunts through thick forests, villains lurking in the shadows. Walking home afterward, we swung sticks like machetes and pretended our sleepy town hid secrets too. Radio mysteries were best enjoyed in total darkness. Families would switch off every lamp, the house sinking into silence except for the voice on the air. Each creak of the floorboard seemed part of the story, every shadow alive with suspense. At theaters, Popeye cartoons were used to sell spinach. We laughed at his bulging muscles, then begged our mothers for spinach at supper, convinced we'd grow just as strong. Imagine that. A cartoon convincing a whole generation to eat their greens. We also danced to live remote broadcasts, big bands playing in faraway hotel ballrooms, their music sent through the air. Couples twirled in kitchens or barns, miles from the orchestra, but moving as though we were right there under the chandeliers. Newsreels often included silly bloopers, slips, falls, and stumbles. Audiences roared with laughter, the sound filling the hall. It was a different kind of joy, unexpected and human, breaking up the seriousness of world events on the screen. For housewives, soap operas on the radio became part of the daily rhythm. Chores were timed to the stories, dishes during one program, laundry during another. The drama of those fictional lives spilled into the hum of everyday work. Even church basements weren't immune to Hollywood's magic. Amateur theater groups staged glamorous plays, using curtains, painted backdrops, and borrowed costumes. The whole community came, and for one night, our neighbors became stars beneath the flickering lights. And at gas stations, radios blasted baseball games. Travelers and townsfolk alike would gather around the pumps, listening to the announcer call each play. For a few minutes, everyone forgot about the dust and the oil. Only the crack of the bat mattered. Oh, the treasures we kids chased after. We'd send away for radio premiums, things like secret decoder rings or badges from our favorite shows. When the package finally arrived, it felt like owning a piece of magic, a secret link between us and the voices we loved so dearly. At the Saturday matinees, when the villains strutted on screen, the whole theater of children would boo and hiss. We threw popcorn sometimes, too. It was all part of the fun. We weren't just watching the story, we were part of it, defending our hero with our voices. Some theaters offered live stage shows before the films. Dancers, comedians, or local singers would perform right there in front of the curtain. The night always felt special, like getting two shows in one with the thrill of something real before the flickering dream began. And on the radio, barn dance programs filled the air. Fiddlers, banjos, and callers made you feel like you'd stepped into a country barn even if you were sitting in a city apartment. People stomped their feet and clapped along right in their kitchens. At the movies, paper masks of famous stars were sometimes handed out. Imagine dozens of children wearing Clark Gable or Greta Garbo faces, giggling through the aisles. It was silly and delightful, and for a few minutes, everyone felt closer to Hollywood. Radio commercials were performed live back then. Actors would slip from dramatic lines into selling soap or cereal without missing a beat. I can still hear their voices rising with emotion, making even toothpaste sound like the most important thing in the world. Sometimes we made our own fun. Families would act out radio plays at home, each of us taking parts and reading lines in funny voices. We'd bang pots or slam doors for sound effects, turning our living room into a stage no one else could see. Kids often played radio announcer, using tin cans as microphones. We'd imitate the smooth voices we heard each night, inventing programs for imaginary audiences. It was all pretend, but it felt so real. We believed we were broadcasting to the world. The gossip columns in movie magazines were fuel for endless chatter. Neighbors would argue over who was dating whom, or whether a rumor was true. It was our small-town version of Hollywood drama, carrying starry dreams into our daily lives. When cartoons showed talking animals, people were truly amazed. Audiences gasped and laughed. Imagine hearing a mouse or a duck crack a joke for the very first time. We couldn't believe our eyes or ears, yet we loved every second. There was even a game called Broadcast Bingo. We'd sit by the radio with our cards, listening for words or songs to match. Winning was a thrill, but mostly it was about the fun of listening together, waiting for the announcer to call out something on your card. At train stations, they'd blast radios through loudspeakers so travelers could hear news and music while waiting. The sounds mingled with the hiss of steam engines and chatter of passengers. It felt like the whole country was moving to the same rhythm. By the late 30s, drive-in theaters began to appear. Oh, what a wonder they were. Families piled into cars, blankets and snacks in tow, watching the big screen under the stars. It felt like freedom, a whole new way of going to the movies. Some adults even practiced their movie star autographs in notepads. They'd try to copy the elegant flourishes of Joan Crawford or Cary Grant, as if one day someone might actually ask for theirs. It was make-believe, but with just enough hope to feel real. Baseball was a national heartbeat, and on shortwave radios we could sometimes catch games from faraway cities. The signal crackled, but hearing that play-by-play felt like holding hands with the rest of America, all of us listening together. Movie reels weren't perfect. Sometimes they broke mid-show. The screen would go dark, and the ushers would scramble to patch the film with tape. We'd wait patiently, chattering in the dark, then cheer when the picture flickered back to life. Local theaters loved holiday raffles. You might walk in for a picture and walk out with a ham or a turkey. Folks would clutch their raffle tickets as tightly as their movie stubs, dreaming of carrying supper home as an extra prize. After late-night horror double bills, we kids would whisper ghost stories on the walk home. Every shadow seemed darker, every tree branch alive. Our laughter and shivers mixed, making the night scarier and sweeter than anything the movies could show. Teenagers copied swing dance moves straight from musicals. They'd practice in kitchens and school gyms, spinning and sliding just like Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. The joy was infectious. You didn't just watch the stars, you tried to become them. And some radios even came with record players built in. Families would play records between broadcasts, turning their homes into tiny concert halls. The mix of live radio and chosen music filled the evenings with warmth, a soundtrack for daily life. I can still picture the way the whole theater gasped when airplanes first soared across the newsreel screen. We'd never seen them move so close, so real, and the roar of the engines on film made our hearts race like we were right there under their wings. Theater programs were little works of art in themselves, ornate covers with swirling designs, bold lettering, and sometimes even painted portraits of the stars. We collected them like treasure. Each one carried not just the memory of the film, but the beauty of its design. Everyone wanted to whistle like Bing Crosby. You'd hear people practicing in alleys, on porches, even while sweeping the sidewalk. It wasn't just a whistle, It was a way of carrying music with you, of sounding a little closer to Hollywood charm. Radios were often hidden in beautiful wooden cabinets, polished until they shone. To anyone else, they looked like fine furniture, but when you turned the dial and the warm hum filled the room, that furniture became our link to the whole world outside. Some diners had singing waiters, and what a joy that was. You'd order a plate of eggs, and suddenly the waiter would break into a popular radio tune, harmonizing with others across the room. It turned an ordinary meal into a show. Cartoon contests captured children's imaginations. We'd draw our own funny heroes and mail them in, hoping they might appear in print or even win a prize. Sitting cross-legged on the floor, pencils in hand, we dreamed of creating the next big character. Radio gossip shows filled our minds with stories about Hollywood stars. Who was marrying whom? Who was fighting? Who was caught dancing at a late-night club? We believed every word, spinning our own tales and keeping the magic of the stars alive in our conversations. Theaters had strict ushers who carried flashlights to hush noisy kids. One beam of light across your row, and you knew to settle down quick. Still, we whispered and giggled, hoping not to get caught, thrilled by the mix of mischief and discipline. Movie openings often brought costumes, cowboy hats for westerns, masks for adventures. The whole lobby would be filled with laughter and color. It was more than just a picture show. It was an event, something to remember long after the film ended. Saturday mornings were sacred for westerns on the radio. We'd sit glued to our chairs, eyes wide, as we followed the gunfights, the galloping horses, the brave sheriffs saving the day. For that hour, our little homes felt like the Wild West itself. Radio had romance confession shows, too, where people shared their love stories. Some were sweet, others heartbroken, but all of them felt real. We'd listen with a hush, as though we'd stumbled into someone's secret diary carried on the airwaves. Between heavy dramas, theaters slipped in short comedy films. We welcomed the chance to laugh, to let our hearts breathe before diving back into something serious. Those little reels of joy were as precious as the features themselves. Farmers brought radios right into the barns. While cows were milked or hay was stacked, baseball games filled the air. You could hear the announcer's voice rising above the lowing of cattle. It made work feel less lonely, more connected to the world beyond the fields. Movie palaces were something else entirely. Some had ceilings covered in gold leaf, glimmering in the dim light. You'd sit there with your eyes lifted, torn between admiring the splendor above or the story on the screen before you. Radio jingles were sung live by quartets, bright and catchy tunes about soap or cereal. We'd find ourselves humming them long after the program ended, the rhythm of advertising tucked into our days as if it were another favorite song. Sometimes people would swap film reels privately for backyard screenings. A sheet hung between trees, a cranky projector clicking away, and suddenly neighbors were gathered in the dark, watching a bit of Hollywood magic right at home. Even picnics weren't without radios. Folks hauled heavy car batteries to power them in open fields, just to have music or ball games while they ate. The sound mingling with laughter and birdsong made the whole afternoon feel alive. Audiences clapped for cartoons as though the characters could hear us. We applauded Mickey and Popeye like they were live performers, filling the theater with cheers for animated friends who felt as real as anyone we knew. Children wrote letters to their favorite radio cowboys, pouring out dreams and questions. Some even got replies, a postcard, a signed photo. Those little envelopes carried hope, bridging the distance between a child's heart and a far-off hero. And afterward, when the movies ended, couples would stroll home, humming the theme songs. The night was quiet, the stars above, and the music lingered in their voices. It was as though the story on the screen walked with them a little while longer.